Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The Snake Pit. I'm your host, Son of Bat, and tonight I'll be talking about Halloween 2. Also known as H2, this is the sequel to Rob Zombie's remake of Halloween and the 10th overall entry in the Halloween franchise. This is also probably the most controversial entry in the series because as far back as I can remember, audiences and critics shit on this movie mercilessly. I used to be one of those people. I absolutely hated this movie back in the day. Although, I don't think I hated it so much for the movie itself. I think I hated it just because everyone else, like all the old school horror heads, hated this movie. And I guess as a way to, like, sound sophisticated or fit in, I was like, oh yeah, like, this movie fucking sucks, bro. But, like, in all honesty, like, I like Rob Zombie's movies. I always tell people I think he's only really done one bad movie, and that kind of goes to the Munsters. I mean, obviously. But Halloween 2, this movie is not that fucking bad. I think it got overhated, and I think it's quite underrated. People say it's the worst one in the franchise. Well, I'd go so far as to say it's probably one of the best ones in the franchise. And I know, I mean, if you ain't rage quitting and leaving after hearing those words leave my mouth, stick around and maybe hear my explanation. But in my opinion, this is probably one of the most original and brutal sequels in the entire franchise. It end caps the series pretty nicely. You got a nice contained little timeline with part 1 and part 2, which is pretty sweet. Even Rob Zombie himself has gone on record as to say he hates franchises with an endless amount of sequels, so he wanted to fucking nip this in the bud and end it. And I kind of like how cleanly cut this movie goes. It's kind of a shame though, because there was supposed to be a sequel called Halloween 3D, which I remember hearing about back in the day, along with hearing about the other Rob Zombie movie that was supposed to come out called like The Blob 3D. And not gonna lie, I'm kind of sad those never came out, because old school Rob Zombie movies before he did the Munsters, his shit was fucking wild. Like 2000s Rob Zombie was unfucking touchable. People may disagree. They don't like, again, like I said in the last video, they don't like his, white trash characters and shit. But to that I say tough shit, because if you know America, or like even up in Canada too, we got people like that. It's a very real thing. Low income, white trash pieces of shit. That is a fucking thing. In this movie, I personally think it's a little bit more toned down. You kind of see it more in the first Halloween. In this one, it's more about Laurie. And again, Laurie in this movie, holy shit, is way crazier. And I think she's an unlikable character, but she's a more likable Laurie, if that makes sense. And again, I'll get more into that later when I talk about the plot of the movie. But I think this is just such an underrated and missed movie. And overhated would be another word I'd use to describe it, because dude, the gore in this is fucking crazy. The kills are just brutal as fuck. Painful, again, like in the first Halloween, just really fucking painful. There's some, like, really doom and dread-induced moments, and, like, a lot of just sadness lurking in this movie. There's some really, like, powerful moments, especially with Annie's father, played by Brad Dourif. My personal opinion, Brad Dourif as Sheriff Brackett, that was probably one of his best emotional performances since The Exorcist 3, in my opinion. Yeah, when he finds, spoiler alert, when he finds Annie dead and his reaction, I mean, dude, that is harsh. Again, we got another killer soundtrack by Tyler Bates, and I forgot to mention this in the first movie, because this doesn't really happen too much in Halloween 2. I mean, we do get a slightly updated take on the John Carpenter Halloween theme, but in the first movie, we basically get the Halloween soundtrack on steroids. Now, what I mean by that is we get this booming, like, bass-heavy, intense Tyler Bates soundtrack, and every so often you'll get a sting of the original Halloween soundtrack from 1978. In this movie, Halloween 2, the soundtrack is 100% its own thing. From what I could remember, there was very little to do with the original Halloween soundtrack. But I think that's pretty cool, because it kind of stands on its own feet. It doesn't rely too much on nostalgia to drive the plot forward. And it says here on the cover of the DVD, one of the most shocking, or one of the most original and shocking entries in the series. And I'd have to say so. This one goes places that the original fucking series never would have gone. No disrespect to Mustafa Akkad, because he kept the series going for the longest fucking time, but he had some really strict rules that I think restricted the series from actually doing some really crazy shit. One of the obvious rules being you can't kill Michael Myers. But and again, this is unfortunate, but also fortunate. Unfortunately, Mustafa Akkad died around the time the first Halloween movie by Rob Zombie was being made came out. So his son Malik Akkad took over all rights for the Halloween franchise, and he told Rob Zombie that on this one occasion he's going to ignore his father's rules and let Rob make the movie he wants to make, ensuring that, you know, he would have all the creative tools at his disposal to make a very competent remake, but not make the exact same movie over again. Again, it's like John Carpenter said, oh, make your own movie, and he did. He made his own movie, and John Carpenter hated it, but Malik Akkad liked it enough to, like, you know, when he got Rob Zombie on board again to do this one, he trusted him to do whatever he wanted and end it. And Rob Zombie wanted to end this series, and Malik let him. There was no, this movie ends with no inclination that there was going to be a sequel. So like I said earlier, although I was sad Halloween 3D never became a thing, this movie ends in a way where I don't think there really could have been a sequel. And originally Rob Zombie wasn't going to do this movie. It was supposed to be the two guys who did the movie Inside, or L'Intérieur, which if you've heard our review on that or haven't, go check it out. That is a brutal fucking French home invasion movie. Fucking disgusting. And you know what? If, let's say in a parallel universe, Rob Zombie didn't make this movie, I think those two would have done perfect. I think it would have been fucking disgusting. But at the same time, I'm glad Rob Zombie got to finish his story because, in my personal opinion, I think this is one of the best movies in the series. But anyway, let me get into that and we'll understand why I think this way. Maybe I'm retarded. Maybe I'm onto something. Let's see. Halloween 2, directed by Rob Zombie, written by Rob Zombie, based on characters by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, produced by Malik Akkad, Andy Gold, and Rob Zombie, starring Malcolm McDowell, Tyler Mane, Sherry Moon Zombie, Brad Dourif, Daniel Harris, and Scout Taylor Compton. Cinematography by Brandon Trost, edited by Glenn Garland, music by Tyler Bates. Production companies Dimension Films, Trancas International Films, and Spectacle Entertainment Group. Distributed distributed by Dimension Films through the Weinstein Company. And side note here, so I mentioned in the first Halloween remake that Rob Zombie and the two shithead Weinstein fucktards were pretty much clashing on set. They didn't like each other because there's this whole history of the Weinsteins showing up on set and trying to demand rewrites and taking shit away from directors and just being general pieces of shit when they're not going around raping female actresses and shit. So Rob Zombie didn't like these assholes. Part of the reason why he didn't want to come back to this movie is because he knew that they were so fucked on the first one that, you know, they might do the same shit. But he kind of thought, you know, who knows, maybe they might turn around and be better to work with. But no, they weren't. They were a bigger pain in the ass on this movie than the first one. Apparently, story goes, they were demanding so many reshoots of Rob Zombie and they were basically just shitting on him and what he was doing. And they would show him scenes from the 2007 Halloween movie, like this. It's got to be like this. You see what we're doing here? And Rob Zombie would look at it and be like, yeah, dude, I know. I made that movie. That's the one I directed, you fucking retards. But anyway, so yeah, this is also a Weinstein production. So again, usually when a movie like this is considered bad, I call it a Weinstein effect. I think whatever's bad about it has to fall down into Weinstein category and them fucking up this movie. Because I think, again, Rob Zombie, with what he had and the restrictions he had, I think he made a pretty good end cap to his Halloween franchise. But anyway, released on August 28th, 2009 in the United States. I mentioned this again in the last one. So the first Halloween movie by Rob Zombie was released on August 30th. I was right. This one was on August 28th. Again, I don't know why with a movie like Halloween you would release it in August. It's fucking beyond stupid. But apparently the movie was re-released on October 30th, 2009 to coincide with the Halloween holiday weekend, but it didn't do as good as the previous installment. With a budget of $15 million and a box office return of $39.4 million. This movie did not do very good when it came out, and it was hated, like universally hated. Essentially, and I'm not even, you know, defending this movie or like blowing smoke up its ass. This movie did kill the franchise for the longest time. I myself used to shit on this movie a lot, but again, I came around on it because I've realized there was way worse to come. But anyway, this movie picks up almost instantly after the ending of Halloween 2007. Before we jump there, though, we get a slight flashback to Michael Myers when he's a child. He's sitting there with his mom, and he has this toy white horse, and he's telling her about a dream he had about her walking down this long hallway with a white horse. And we also get this text crawl that explains, like, I can't remember exactly word for word what it is, but it pretty much is talking about how, like, the white horse symbolizes, like, purity or innocence or something. I think even Rob Zombie himself said the item doesn't necessarily matter. He just chose a white horse because it's, like, thematically fits or looks good or something. But essentially it means, like, innocence lost or purity lost, the thing that Michael Myers doesn't have. And then we immediately jump 15 years later to the ending of Halloween 2007, or as I like to call it, Halloween 1993, because if you heard the last episode, that's when I believe the story takes place. And I have more reason to believe this takes place in the 90s, but I'll get more into that later. We find Laurie Strode wandering down the street after having shot Michael Myers in the face. She's picked up by Sheriff Brackett, who takes her to the hospital. Annie has survived her attack with Michael Myers. She's getting taken to the hospital. And Loomis has survived also, so he's getting taken to the emergency room. Michael Myers has been put into a meat wagon by these two orderlies. One of them is played by the cop from Sons of Anarchy. I can't remember his name, that short little bald dude. And the other one's played by Richard Brake, who would later become a Rob Zombie regular. And this guy, he was crazy as Doomhead in 31. He is fucking disgusting in this movie. He is basically like a implied necrophile orderly. He's talking to the other dude in the car about, like, how hot, I guess it would be, Linda's corpse is because her tits were hanging out and shit. And he's like saying he wouldn't, but you kind of get the idea that he would. And it's just fucking disgusting. In the middle of this necrophilia conversation, their van slams into a fucking cow on the middle of the road in the goriest crash. Buddy, the driver, gets fucking completely mulched into a pulp. Richard Brake is just there with, like, a dislocated jaw going like, fuck, for, like, what seems like ever, and it's, like, kind of clicking and shit, and it's all nasty. Michael Myers wakes the fuck up, comes out, takes a piece of glass, and cuts his fucking head off. It is brutal. And then we jump back to Laurie in the hospital where she sees Annie all stitched up, and we get the first feelings of what would later come of her survivor's guilt. She tries to get escorted back to her room, and then, of course, Michael makes his way into the hospital and starts slashing his way to Laurie. He kills some of the nurses in some very grotesque fucking ways. And then it starts playing out like Halloween 2 from 1981, continuing the story from, almost the instant after Michael is presumed dead, going on this rampage through the hospital. It is fucking brutal. It's in the rain. It's pitch black. You only really get red lights going. The chase is intense as fuck because Laurie's got a giant cast on her fucking leg. She's literally throwing herself down the stairs just to get away from Michael. The fight comes outside where she lands in this, like, it seems like a truck filled with bodies, and it's brutal. And right before she's about to get murked, she wakes up and we find out it's a dream. And I fucking love this because it subverts the audience expectation, or more specifically, it subverts the Halloween fans' expectations, because I think most people, myself included, were expecting this movie to play out as a remake of Halloween 2 from 1981. And this sequence goes on for about 25 minutes. So it's a long, fucking shot sequence. And a lot of people hate dream sequences. I personally am not a big fan of fake outs like that, but I think in this instance, it's really cool to subvert expectations. The scene itself is really cool. So even though it does feel kind of cheap because it is a dream, I don't really have a problem with it. I think it's fucking brutal, and I think it's a nice little callback to Halloween 2. So I don't really have a problem with it. And so we jump to 2 years later, and I assume this would be 1995, because I'm going on the math that the first movie took place in 93. Laurie's now living with the Bracketts, and Michael has been missing and presumed dead. Laurie, though, this is like the most different depiction of Laurie that we have ever seen in any movie. And again, like the dream sequence, I kind of like it. In this one, she is a total wreck. She's coping with trauma, the loss of her adoptive parents, or she still thinks they're her parents up until later, but the loss of her friends, just like the physical damage she's endured, seeing so many people die, getting, again, violently just assault, having to think she killed somebody because, she thinks she's killed Michael Myers. She's dealing with survivor's guilt. She even mentions in therapy that every time she sees Annie's scarred up face, it makes her, she doesn't say it, but you can tell she feels like she wants to kill her because the guilt is too much, and it's brutal. And by the way, I should have mentioned this. In the hospital sequence, when she's getting wheeled around, the female doctor is played by Caroline Williams, who, if any of you know your horror history, is Stretch from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And her therapist in the not dream world is fucking Margot Kidder from fucking Black Christmas and the Amityville Horror. So, just like the first movie, man, there's so many horror cameos. Although Sid Haig does not show up in this one. He showed up in the first one as one of the guys working at the cemetery. And unfortunately, Bill Moseley's not in this movie. He was supposed to be in it, but what's his name? Ended up taking his part. Jeff Daniel Phillips. And he plays this guy named Howard Boggs who works at the strip club. He was supposed to be played by Bill Moseley, but I guess the Weinsteins pissed off Bill Moseley so fucking bad that he ended up leaving, and his role had to be given to Jeff Daniel Phillips, who ended up having 2 roles in this movie. The other character he played was this horror MC at the barnyard party named Seymour Coffins. So that's pretty weird and kind of shitty. Daniel Roebuck actually plays the strip club owner, the guy in the Frankenstein costume. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but it's such a small part in the first movie. He's the strip club owner named Big Lou. He's in the first movie. He's actually Deborah Meyer's boss. So I guess his kill makes more sense. At least now thinking about it, his kill makes more sense watching it. But Malcolm McDowell, of course, is back. Well, what's going on with his storyline is since the events of the last movie, he's made another book about Michael Myers. This one is not well received. People are considering it blood money. They think he's exploiting the people of Haddonfield and their families. And he actually has turned into a total asshole in this one. In the first movie, he's more of a sympathetic character. You feel like he truly did want to help, and he feels like he's a shattered man, kind of. Whereas, but although in the original movie, and I'm speaking about the Rob Zombie one, you do get this brief moment where you can kind of see that he's a bit of a narcissist. And it's the scene where he's with Sid Haig in the cemetery. And even Sid Haig is saying, he's like, oh, the guy who wrote that book, the doctor, fucking blood money, man. And then Malcolm McDowell goes, oh, yes, I've read that book. It's a fucking masterpiece. And that's like an inkling to what he's like in this movie. Because the whole movie, at least up until the end, he's just this vain, narcissistic asshole. Total piece of shit, man. Like, just verbally abusive to his fucking agent, just dismissive of everybody. He's just fucked. But I kind of dug it again because it's the opposite. And there's a funny scene calling back to that where he's going on his press release for his book, and his agent has a picture of him, and he's wearing the fucking tan trench coat, and his goatee looks like how it did in the first movie. And he looks at the picture and he starts wigging out like a child, and he goes, no, this is old Loomis. I'm new Loomis. And he's like, we barely cementing the fact that he's not the same character that the fans, grew up with, Halloween 2, 4, 5, and even 6. Because even in 4, 5, and 6, he came off as more ambiguous and gray, never like a villain, but he was definitely a drunkard. In this one, he's definitely an antagonist to a degree. Again, he made another book where he's capitalizing off the murders in Haddonfield, and it's just rubbing everyone the wrong way. Laurie, again, dealing with her trauma, she's kind of become unbearable to Annie. Annie's father, though, is like definitely a very caring person. He, for all, the lashing out and the freak outs, he tries to deal with Laurie and tell Annie to do the same to deal with her because she has no one left. And also, he probably feels guilty because it was him who, put the child up for adoption and, created this almost cycle. Not blaming him, but I assume feels some level of guilt for this whole thing. And honestly just wants to see her turn out okay compared to, her biological family. It's a real mess. This whole movie is like got a lot of character shit going on, and I know Scout Taylor Compton got a lot of shit for her portrayal of Laurie because she's always screaming and she comes off as kind of a bitch, but it makes sense. She is totally racked and shattered by trauma. Her psyche is split, and it doesn't help that later on in the movie she gets a copy of Loomis's book. and she ends up reading it, and in it there's a chapter that totally outs her as being Angel Myers, the baby sister to Michael Myers. And this is kind of what makes her go into a full-on chaotic snap. She tells Annie and her father to go fuck themselves, and then she ends up going out to party with her new friends from work. They go to this barnyard jam where essentially it's a barnyard jam, and it's fucking sick. There's this guy named Captain Clegg and the Night Creatures who's like a fake in-movie band, but they have a CD in real life. It's like horror rockabilly shit. Really, really great music for Halloween. I highly recommend y'all check it out while it's still Halloween. But hey, tomorrow is Day of the Dead, so it will work with that too. So they're at this party, and, while they're at the party, Michael has made his way there. He's killed a few people. There's a scene where he goes back to the Rabbit and Red strip club, and he fucking kills his mom's old boss. He kills a stripper, and he kills the one of two characters played by Jeff Daniel Phillips. And then he makes his way to the Halloween party, where he brutally kills Laurie's fucking friends. The one death you feel really bad for, at least I did as being a guy, was there's this guy who's like picks up one of Laurie's friends, and he goes to like fuck her in his fuck van, and you can tell he's just like this virgin little like mousy guy, and he's just a nice dude, and he goes to go take a piss, and then he gets the shit stabbed out of him while the chick's waiting in the van, and it's like you feel bad, but again, she gets fucked the fuck up, dude. Everyone gets torn the fuck apart. Annie knows something's up because the dad, her father, Sheriff Brackett, keeps calling the house, checking to see if Laurie's back. He's also stationed a police officer to sit outside the house, just like the year before, to make sure nothing happens. But of course, Michael's there. He kills this poor son of a bitch, and then gets into the house where he gets to Annie. You don't see her death. It's actually filmed in a really trippy way where you see him go in the house, and she goes into the bathroom, and you see Michael Myers' reflection in the mirror. She turns around and sees him, starts running, and then it cuts. You get little snippets of what happened when Laurie and her friends come back to the house, because at the party, Laurie starts having this psychotic break where she almost has like, and I should have mentioned this earlier, my bad, guys. She starts having like these shared dreams almost. Like she has one dream where she's thinking about killing Annie in almost the exact same way that Michael killed that guy Ronnie in the first movie. Like she has a dream that she's wearing the same clown costume, and that she tapes Annie up to a chair and she's about to slit her throat. The dream she has at the Halloween party is that of, Sherry Moon Zombie, or should I say Deborah Myers, and young Michael Myers telling her to go home. She freaks the fuck out, and I honestly think, for as much of a hated movie as this is, I think there might be some love shown somewhere, because the party freakout scene in this reminded me a lot of the party freakout scene in Terrifier 2. I don't know. It could be a common thing, freaking out at a Halloween party. Maybe I'm thinking too much into it. Made me think of Terrifier 2. There's also a couple moments in this movie that made me think of other horror movies, like toward the end, actually, there was a really cool one I'll get into, but maybe that's why I love this movie so much. But basically, all hell's breaking loose. Laurie gets back to the house. She thinks everything's okay. She's starting to come to grips with the fact that she's Michael Myers' sister. But as soon as she gets in the house, she sees blood everywhere. The whole place is fucked the fuck up, and she finds Annie's dead body. She, tells her friend to call the police. Her friend gets fucking... she goes outside looking at the address, and Michael yanks her in Texas Chainsaw style, just like how Leatherface yanks the chick in the original movie. I wouldn't be surprised if this was intentional on Rob Zombie's part, because I know for a fact he's a huge fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But again, another cool callback in my opinion. Aside from the bloody mess, I forgot to mention Laurie's room. It's fucking sick, bro. She got like a bunch of Alice Cooper posters and like, graffiti on the walls, like a giant picture of Charles Manson. Like the room looks like how my room looked in high school. Like this shit is fucking so sick and such a nostalgia trip. But the other thing too that made me think, side note, I was telling people I'm adamantly sure these two movies take place in the mid-90s. Now, my rationale for doubling down on this is when they go up the stairs to find Annie's body, you can clearly see a media stand, and there's just VHS tapes. And I'm pretty sure no one uses cell phones in this fucking movie. So I'm pretty sure this takes place in 95. So I'm going to say it does. Anyway, back to the story. So yeah, like Laurie ends up getting taken by Michael Myers. Sheriff Brackett comes home and he finds his daughter murdered, and I think one of the most emotionally draining and brutal and upsetting scenes in the entire series. He sees Annie's dead body on the floor, and his guttural reaction, it just hits. This is why I'm saying I think this is Brad Dourif's best emotionally driven acted scene since anything in The Exorcist 3, because it's just, it hits. And then the intercut scenes of young Danielle Harris when she's like a child, like Halloween 4 and 5 age, and it just hits even harder. I think especially for Halloween fans who have grown up with the movies and have seen her as a kid to an adult now, it's just like a mind fuck, and it really does emotionally hit on a different level. And then, of course, they get a distress call about an assailant who's clearly Michael Myers carrying a girl, and they go after it. Loomis tries to have this redemption arc. Oh, there's so many subplots I forgot to mention with Loomis's. Okay, you know what? Sorry, I'm all over the place like the last one. Again, a lot with this movie, a lot going on. But, so essentially Loomis, he's trying to shovel this book that nobody wants. He ends up going on a talk show with Chris Hardwick and Weird Al. They make fun of him, and they basically bring up, like, you're vilified by the entire town. How does it feel to be, like, the most hated man in America? He does a book promotion on October 31st where he gets a couple fans, like true crime people, and then he gets this weird sicko freak coming in, and he autographs the book for him. I think it's like Eric the Slayer or some shit like that. But then right after that, this dude comes in who's clearly distraught, and it's Linda's father. And he basically calls him, he's like, well, how does it feel to know your monster killed my girl? And it's kind of an emotionally fucked scene too. I think it's a really interesting thing to put in. And I thought it was cool that Rob Zombie explored how the effects of these murders really shook up Haddonfield in only 2 years. And he pulls a gun on Loomis at the book signing, but he doesn't get a shot off. Apparently the gun was empty, which I think might be another callback Rob Zombie made to Charles Manson, because that's kind of like when I believe it was Squeaky pulled an unloaded gun on Gerald Ford. Pretty trippy, but I could be wrong, but who knows. Anyway, jumping back forward to where we were in the movie, or the plot, I should say, Sheriff Brackett gets a call saying that an assailant was seen carrying a woman to an abandoned shack on some farmland. They believe it's Michael Myers and Laurie. The same thing is broadcast on TV, and Loomis sees it, and he thinks, I guess, because he's starting to have the realization that he's a piece of shit after watching the interview on TV. So he decides to go make a dash back to Haddonfield, and he does, and he shows up right as the police barricade is going around and they're about to shoot Michael. The SWAT's all there. Laurie's in the shack with Michael, but she's seeing like adult Michael Myers, child Michael Myers, and the mom, like the two ghost apparition versions, and they keep saying something about sending her home. Loomis, he tries to tell Sheriff Brackett to let him go in and fix it. Sheriff Brackett punches him the fuck out, basically tells him to go fuck himself, and that there's nothing he wants to hear from him, to fuck off. Loomis U-turns, runs into the fucking shed and says, hey man, I owe you this much. He goes in and tries to make Michael stand down. There he's like, come on Laurie, come with me, and she's like, no, they won't let me go, they're holding me back. And then we see that there are no, clearly we the audience know there are no apparitions holding them back, but Loomis really sees how broken Laurie's psyche is. He gets totally fucked up by Michael Myers, who gets shot by the SWAT team. Laurie steps out of the busted out shed, goes to reach for the knife, and then she dies by suicide by cop. And then the very last scene is essentially the dream Michael was telling his mom about being in a long white room with his mom coming forward with a white horse, but this time it's Laurie sitting on the bed, not Michael, and the movie ends. This movie is so fucking dark. Sorry for the spoilers. I just finished watching this one, actually. I still fucking love this movie. It is so unforgivingly brutal. It is uncompromising. It's borderline disgusting with some of the kills. But again, it's great. Like, it's not Terrifier level over the top. Like, that shit is, like, to me, Terrifier levels of violence is funny because it's so cartoonish. This was over the top, but within the realms of realism. It was brutal. Again, the the fucking Halloween, the hospital sequence, the Halloween 1 hospital sequence. Oh my God, dude. Like, that was one of the most brutal dream sequences. And again, like I said, the subversion of expectations. Like, you think that this movie is going to play out as a remake of Halloween 2 from 1981, and it just turns into its own thing. I like that most of it is spent with Laurie, and we get to see how fractured she is mentally, and how, like, it really goes full circle and everything just ends. Dude, all the main people involved in this movie, with the exception of Sheriff Brackett, die. But I assume off camera he's probably shooting himself because of everything that he's been through in the past 2 years. It is a dark fucking movie. I think it's up there with one of Rob Zombie's best. I think if I have to think about this right now, my 3 favorite Rob Zombie movies are probably going to be House of a Thousand Corpses, Lords of Salem, and Halloween 2. Or, I might even have to look at Halloween 2 like how I look at the original Halloween 1 and Halloween 2, bind them together as one long movie. Because just like Halloween from 1978 and Halloween 2 from 1981, you can watch Rob Zombie's Halloween and H2 back to back as one long movie, and it totally works. The only positive with Rob Zombie's version is you don't have to dread sitting through another 10 plus fucking sequels. Another thing, like, subconsciously, that may be why I like this, is because it's like the Halloween 3 of the franchise. It's the black sheep. And, speaking of references and callbacks, I could be tripping. I thought there was a really unique, and I could be wrong again, but I saw this at least. I thought there was a really cool callback to Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. More specifically, the scene at the end where Buddy's like, "Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!" Dude, when Michael Myers is in the shack and Loomis is trying to, like, calm him down and get Laurie out, the way he's yelling at Michael and the way that the scene's cut, it feels like a callback to Halloween 3 Season of the Witch's ending, which I fucking love. That movie, like, also ended on a huge fucking downer. Like, it ended on the, like, a huge downer. This one ends the same way. Maybe I just love downer endings in movies, but for all intents and purposes, this is probably one of my favorite Halloween movies. I said in the last video, I never rank the original with the sequels. So usually I, don't count the first one. But if I had to rank, my top 3, it would be Halloween fucking 3, Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie, and Halloween 2007 by Rob Zombie. Those are my 3 favorites. They've just aged better and better the more time goes on. And I don't know. Like I said in the first video, this is the true crime of the Halloween timelines. Like, I think the depiction of Laurie's mental illness and, the depiction of survivor's guilt and how she deals with trauma was more realistic than how Jamie Lee Curtis does it. Because like I said, with the movie H20, she's kind of just a wine mom who has an occasional nightmare and a little paranoia. And then in the fucking Halloween Danny McBride shit trilogy, she's basically just Clint Eastwood. Both versions I don't like. In this version, she's not a gun-toting badass. She's not Ellen Ripley. Ellen Ripley was a totally different character archetype that I don't think applies to a Laurie Strode character. Laurie Strode was a 17-year-old girl, and having her be a complete psychotic mess in this movie made sense to me because, again, this is a kid who's still mentally developing, who literally watched her entire family die, her friends die in some very brutal fucking ways, and then in the span of a year, while trying to piece all this together, she finds out that her parents weren't even her parents, but she's actually the long-lost sibling to the guy who killed everyone she ever knew. It's a dark fucking movie, and honestly, I don't think it gets enough credit, but I think, who knows, maybe in the next few years, people are going to look more fondly on this one because, like I said, that Blumhouse trilogy came out, and I think it really shit the bed, and that's what ultimately killed the franchise. Not to mention, going back to the beginning of this podcast, I don't know how anyone can say, at least back in the day, this was the worst one, because not that long before, in 2002, Halloween Resurrection came out, and yeah, people sure, they joke about it now, and they say, oh yeah, it's funny, it's campy. People weren't like that back in the day when it came out. People actually hated that movie, and that was a bad movie. Sure, there's a couple funny scenes here and there when you watch it now. It's still not a good movie. It's still just as bad as when it was when it came out. H20 aged like fucking milk. So, yeah, again, like I said, Rob Zombie's Halloween and Halloween 2, chef's kiss, masterpiece in my opinion. I think they've surpassed a bulk of these movies. And for remakes, that's a hell of a feat. Going down into my ranking of this movie, if I had to rank Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie, honestly, this director's cut, I'd give it a perfect 10. I've heard the rated cut has an alternate ending where the asylum scene plays out, but it doesn't play out as a death vision. It plays out as an implication more that she went crazy and now she's in the loony bin. I've never seen the rated cut, so I don't know how this ending plays out. But I'm glad I've seen the unrated cut my whole life, and I like the idea that this is a definitive ending, because sometimes a story needs to end. You know, I mean, as much as I enjoy, like I said, the Thorn trilogy, these movies got to end at some point. I mean, like Friday the 13th is another one where it's like, as I enjoy some of the later sequels, it's like, you can't keep making these forever because it's going to get stale after a while. And I hate to harp on the Blumhouse trilogy again, but I think that's a prime example of why you can't make this movie over and over and over again. And yeah, John Carpenter, my final words on him, again, just like with Halloween 1, he does not like this movie. Rob Zombie offered him a cameo role, to which he turned down. And yeah, sure, he's a master of horror, but that's no excuse for acting like a douchebag, in my opinion. Like I said, the guy's made some sick fucking movies, and I actually got to correct myself, because I said in the last video he hasn't made a good movie since 1995. He hasn't made a good movie since 1994. In the Mouth of Madness came out in 94. 95, he made Village of the Damned, and that was a shit movie. He hasn't made a good movie since 94. And the fact that he greenlights the new trilogy written by two comedians as the true sequel to the first movie is laughable, in my opinion. And the guy's kind of a joke. Aside from making some killer soundtracks, I think he's kind of lost it in terms of story writing and directing in his old age. And to be quite frank with you, he didn't even really write Halloween. A lot of that had to do with Deborah Hill. And you can tell, because Deborah Hill had nothing to do with Halloween 2018 Kills or Ends, and those movies are shit shows. So John Carpenter, you're a dick. Love your movies, but you're not a god. You're a douchebag. Some of the film bros and fans might revere you as a god and might be seething at what I'm saying at this criticism, but I think you're just butthurt that somebody took something as fucked up as Halloween 2 and turned it into a competent sequel. And the fact that Rob Zombie made the familial connection between Laurie and Michael work, I think that might have rubbed him the wrong way, because John Carpenter used that as a cheap excuse. Oh, I was drunk and I needed to connect the movies like that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, but you've established that as continuity. And Rob Zombie cemented it with his movies, and he made it work with generational trauma, connected trauma, and the familial link of psychopath. Like, he made it work. And maybe I'm just justifying it too much. Maybe I'm a Rob Zombie stan because I grew up on his music and shit, but I don't know, man. Out of all the sequels in this series, I think in terms of a good adrenaline rush, scary, brutal horror movie, it goes to Rob Zombie. If you want a campy, fun set of sequels, go with 4, 5, and 6. If you want something that goes completely different, that's a unique, original experience, go with 3. But if you want, a remake, but like a remake on steroids, a remake done the right way, Rob Zombie did it. He met the task and he hit it out of the fucking park. So yeah, I give Halloween 2 unrated director's cut a perfect 10 out of 10. I highly recommend this movie. I hope you guys can find some enjoyment out of this and see it for what it is, because it is a really cool movie and I think it's overhated and underlooked. Happy Halloween, you sick fuckers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be back to you with the next one. If you heard a lot of gaps between what I was saying, my mouth is dry as fuck. I ate a massive edible. I've been smoking bowls all fucking day just to get into the Halloween season, so I got the Halloween cotton mouth. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Otherwise, see you in the next one. Peace!